Good evening, I'm Mark Kelly, and this is The National. The Russia-Trump connection will face new scrutiny as leaks about the president shake Republicans.
They raised very serious questions.
The covert moves to seize control of condo boards and the millions in fees they spend. In Ottawa, transgender rights are cheered and challenged.
Do we really want a Canada where people walk on eggshells, afraid to speak?
Plus, Red Sharon checks in with a cancer patient as she braces to learn if her treatment worked.
Tomorrow's a big day.
It is a big day.
Donald Trump may have wanted the FBI to end its investigation into possible ties between his administration and Russia, may have repeatedly insisted there's nothing there. But tonight, the Justice Department has named a special prosecutor to do his own investigation. A high-profile, highly significant move that came as a growing number of Republicans started to publicly agree it's the right thing to do. Lindsay Duncombe leads off our coverage again tonight.
Director, if you would please rise, I will begin by swearing you in.
Enter a new character in the drama swirling around the White House. Robert Mueller is a former FBI director with a reputation for fairness.
He is the best I ever saw. Leadership, judgment, decision-making, there is nobody better at doggedly pursuing a target without being subjected to any pressures from Congress, the president, the media, anybody in the FBI.
In a statement, the Deputy Attorney General said the public interest requires me to place this investigation under the authority of a person who exercises a degree of independence from the normal chain of command, saying Mueller will look into Russian interference into the election and related matters. Those open-ended instructions give him power to call witnesses, subpoena documents, potentially even the president's tax returns. The news comes 24 hours after it was reported Trump asked former FBI Director James Comey to stop investigating Michael Flynn's ties to Russia, potential grounds for obstruction of justice. That had some Democrats seeing a way to get rid of Trump.
I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to call for the impeachment of the President of the United States of America for obstruction of justice.
More significantly, some Republicans were changing their tone in light of the most recent allegations.
They are deeply troubling. They raise very serious questions.
We also can't say that every new piece of information that comes out is totally false and not true. We have to look at this with very sober eyes and get to the bottom of it.
The special investigation will happen alongside congressional inquiries. House and Senate committees have both asked former FBI Director James Comey to testify, and they want to see his memo or memos about meetings with Trump.
But you have to put your head down and fight.
Speaking to Coast Guard grads today, Trump seemed to be handling this scandal like all the rest, blaming the media.
No politician in history, and I say this with great surety, has been treated worse or more unfairly.
In a three-line statement tonight, Donald Trump's tone was terse, saying that a thorough investigation will confirm what we already know, that there was no collusion between my campaign and any foreign entity, and adding he looks forward to the matter concluding quickly. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
Well, as you heard in that report, the word impeachment is being thrown around a whole lot this week. But if it's in the offing at all, it's a long way off. We asked our Stephen D'Souza to walk us through why people are accusing Trump of obstruction of justice, whether that could lead to impeachment, and if that would necessarily mean he'd be out of the Oval Office.
Did Donald Trump obstruct justice in his dealings with former FBI Director James Comey?
For obstruction of justice.
How to answer that question is a hotly debated topic in Washington right now.
It's obviously it's no small matter when we're talking about impeaching the President of the United States.
In the past, an independent counsel was brought in. The role is often associated with Ken Starr, who investigated Bill Clinton's relationship with Monica Lewinsky in the 90s. But the law that created that role and gave Starr free rein no longer exists. So the special counsel announced today, while powerful, could face political interference and could be fired by the president. But if it is found Trump obstructed justice, that is an impeachable offense.
We certainly at least have probable cause to begin an impeachment investigation, which is the first constitutional step towards possible impeachment.
Impeachment doesn't have to meet the same legal standard as criminal charges. If Trump is impeached, it's up to the House of Representatives to decide if the president abused his authority.
Impeachment is not a legal determination. It is rather a combined legal, political, and moral determination.
A majority vote in the House is needed to impeach a president. Richard Nixon resigned before his impeachment vote could take place.
What's unusual about this historical instance is that no Congress has ever impeached a president of the same party.
Experts say with a Republican president and a Republican-controlled Congress, ultimately public opinion could decide what happens next.
And it's going to get very tricky when members of Congress start to feel uncomfortable about their reelection. Is it going to make their race uncomfortable? Is it going to lead to them being unelected?
Right now, only a handful of Republicans dare entertain the idea of impeachment.
Would those allegations be grounds for impeachment?
If the allegations are true, yes.
But even Democrats say impeachment isn't happening anytime soon.
I think we're a long way from knowing the facts here at this point.
Keep in mind that impeachment doesn't automatically mean removal from office. Bill Clinton was impeached. Removal only happens after a trial in the Senate, where a 2/3 majority is needed to convict a president. And in all of American history, that's never happened. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
While many Americans may be thinking, how can Trump possibly survive this? A significant and vocal minority is deeply convinced none of what's being reported is true, that it's all part of a conspiracy to take down the president they elected. And this is incredibly significant, according to our Keith Bogue. We spoke earlier. Keith, we're seeing a deeply polarized America right now. Tell us how the two sides of this divide are perceiving what's going on in the White House right now.
Well, that's right, Mark. Essentially, we have two Americas now with different worldviews whose realities are reinforced by the media they choose to consume. So, if you are someone who listens to CNN or CBC for that matter and reads the New York Times and the Washington Post, what you're hearing and reading is a story about a White House in chaos that's living under the cloud of suspicion about its connections to Russia and is lately under suspicion for the president perhaps having been involved in trying to influence an FBI investigation. But if you're getting your news from Fox News, reading Breitbart and others on Twitter, columnists and so on, you're hearing a completely different story. You're hearing a story about how the deep state is trying to depose an elected president in order to protect the interests and influence of the deep state against a new president who wants to drain the swamp. Two completely different realities based on the same set of circumstances.
And how does that divide then affect this whole talk of impeachment now?
Well, I think the lesson that politicians especially learned from the Clinton impeachment in 1999 was that you don't proceed with that if you don't have the country behind you to actually remove the president from office after he's been duly elected. The question then is, how do you build that kind of a consensus for impeachment when the country is as divided, not just in its opinions about the story, but in its sense of what the reality of the story actually is?
Keith Bogue in Washington tonight. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Mark.
Even if his supporters are standing strong, the markets appear to be less confident about Trump, specifically his ability to deliver on his tax and banking reforms. Both the Dow and S&P suffered their worst percentage drop since last September. And the Nasdaq had its worst day since last June. Bank stocks were hardest hit, and the U.S. dollar lost all the gains it's made since Trump's election. The U.S. Army soldier behind one of the largest leaks in American history, helping to make WikiLeaks a household name, is now free. Chelsea Manning went for pizza and sent out this tweet of her shoes with the caption, "First Steps of Freedom." She was sentenced to 35 years in military prison, but served 7 after the sentence was commuted by the outgoing Obama administration. Manning, who is transgendered, transitioned behind bars, but was forced to serve time in a male prison. Coming up, Montreal turns 375 amid protest. cynicism, and a birthday bill some call way too steep. An Ottawa man has been found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder. Ian Bush was on trial for the violent killing of an elderly couple and their neighbor nearly a decade ago. The case went cold for years until another crime in 2014 led police to an arrest. The CBC's Christy Neese was at the courthouse today.
The triple murder shocked Ottawa in 2007. 3 elderly victims found dead in their secure luxury condo, each tied up with plastic bags placed over their heads. The victims were retired tax judge Albin Guérin, his wife Raymonde, and their neighbor Marie-Claire Beniscus.
She moved there to be safe when her husband died, thinking, you know, Riviera was going to be a safe place for her. And look what happened.
For years, the murders went unsolved. The break finally came in 2014 after another despicable crime. 101-year-old Second World War veteran Ernest Cote was tied up and beaten, a bag placed over his head, but he survived.
I was madder than a wasp. Wasps ain't afraid, they're mad.
Ian Bush was arrested, and DNA linked him to the triple murder. Today, the jury deliberated less than an hour and a half before finding Bush guilty. The apparent motive? Bush blamed the retired judge for his small role in a long-standing tax dispute.
The crimes were appalling and horrific, and no words can describe the horror and despair visited upon the families of the victims.
After the verdict, Bush showed no remorse. In fact, quite the opposite.
He was grinning as he walked out of the courtroom, and I think that is maybe the best way of evaluating what Ian Bush is.
Bush's lawyer says he'll appeal. Meanwhile, the trial for the assault on Ernest Cote is scheduled for the fall, even though Cote died 2 years ago. Christy Neese, CBC News, Ottawa.
Each month, condo owners across Canada hand over millions of dollars in fees. And who decides how that money is spent is at the centre of a CBC News investigation. Owners and residents of several Toronto buildings are accusing a group of individuals of hijacking their condo boards. John Lancaster has the details.
Last December, it was election time at this condo in downtown Toronto. Owners voted in a board of directors to run the building and its $2 million budget. Condo owner Ray Chepsiak says alleged irregularities soon came to light.
The property manager noticed that some of the signatures didn't line up with the signatures that we have on file in the building on legal documents.
Condo owners suspected this man, Daryl McGregor, had submitted more than a dozen proxy ballots with forged signatures.
We had 12 emails that said that's not my signature and I did not send in a proxy.
Condo owners filed a police report. McGregor was turfed from the board. He's now taking condo owners to court saying he doesn't know anything about forged signatures. It's not the only Toronto condo where election wrongdoing has surfaced. McGregor and associates Ray Blanchard and George Latchko sit on at least 2 other condo boards. Collectively, they've sat on about a dozen boards controlling tens of millions of dollars. In some cases, they aren't registered owners in the buildings and don't live there either.
I have to wonder why they're running for the board of directors. They're not getting paid, but they're in control of significant amounts of money. And this group of people have taken very aggressive steps to get themselves elected.
Election irregularities allegedly plagued the election at this condo tower, too. This resident, who lives in the building but is scared of retribution, wonders how the men are spending her condo's $2.6 million budget.
They did fire the property management company on a weekend without telling anyone. A few months after that, they did change the cleaning and the security and the fire inspection company. It seems like everyone's been changed, but we're not really sure because they don't really tell us who the new companies are, what's happened to them, and how they've selected them.
In at least one case, a condo board awarded an energy contract that paid thousands in commissions to McGregor. It cost condo owners tens of thousands in extra costs, though. The Ontario government says changes are coming to the Condo Act. As it stands, almost anyone over 18 can be on a condo board, even if you don't own or live in a building you want to control. John Lancaster, CBC News, Toronto.
Just one more note about this story. CBC News reached out to the people accused of attempting to take control of the condo boards. Those who replied denied involvement in any wrongdoing. Well, Ford is axing 1,400 jobs, the largest cuts at the automaker in a decade. Buyout packages will be offered to workers in the U.S., Mexico, Asia, and Canada. The cuts will be office jobs, not on the factory floor. Earlier this year, Ford canceled a plan to move a plant to Mexico, expanding its operations in the U.S. instead. Back then, U.S. President Donald Trump claimed credit for Ford's change of heart. For activists and supporters of transgender rights, it's a critical moment. Parliament is considering a bill that would give trans Canadians the legal right to lives free of discrimination. But some oppose Bill C-16, and today it was their turn to speak to lawmakers. Katie Simpson has the scene both inside and outside Parliament.
The urgent plea to pass Bill C-16 was brought to the lawn of Parliament.
Trans rights are human rights.
Activists want the Senate to hurry up and pass the legislation that would make it illegal to discriminate on the basis of gender identity and gender expression, as well as adding the terms to hate speech legislation. While the rally drew support outside, inside, a Senate committee studying the bill heard from those who oppose the idea.
Do we really want a Canada where people walk on eggshells, afraid to speak, afraid not to speak? I do not.
Witnesses say C-16 threatens free speech. Senators heard arguments today that claimed the bill would make it a crime to not use an individual's preferred pronoun. Instead of he or she, some people prefer they, she or z.
If somebody says, I'm not going to use those words, are brought before the tribunal, they will find themselves in contempt of court, and prison is the likely outcome of that process.
Witnesses argued they are not transphobic, but are opposed to governments forcing citizens to use certain language.
Potential violation of the hate speech codes is an indication of just how deeply the culture of victimization has sunk into our society.
The time is now.
But for Joshua Ferguson, who's been the victim of a hate crime living as a non-binary Canadian, this law is long overdue. The Senate has killed similar legislation in the past.
To the senators who don't support the bill, I just have to say that, I'm a living, breathing human being in Canada, and I've had a very tough life because of who I am, and I'm not the only one.
The Justice Minister has previously said there is nothing in C-16 that compels anyone to call someone he, she, or otherwise. Mark.
Katie, there was something controversial said at that Senate committee today. Tell us about that.
Well, independent Senator Andre Pratt was trying to make a very clear point about just how hurtful language can be, and that if transgender Canadians want to be called a specific pronoun, they should be given that respect. But in trying to make that point, Senator Pratt used racially charged language.
Some people may think that blacks should not be referred by their name, that they should all be called hey nigger, but you don't call them hey nigger, you call them by their name, because this is things that you do. So this same kind of things would apply to transgender people. You don't call them by a name that they don't think they should be called them. You call them by the name that they choose and that by the pronoun that they choose, because this is the respectful thing to do.
This issue will come up again tomorrow. Senators will continue to review the legislation clause by clause, and there are some on the committee that say it could be passed, the legislation could be passed before the end of the session. Mark.
All right, Katie, thanks so much. Well, some news tonight about a senior CBC journalist embroiled in a controversy over cultural appropriation. Steve Latorante is leaving his role as managing editor of The National, at least for now. He's moving to another department, and CBC management says it will reassess his connection to this program in the fall. Latorante was one of several influential journalists who tweeted, apparently jokingly, that they'd kick in money for an appropriation prize to be awarded to authors who write about cultures other than their own. Most, including Latorante, have apologized. Straight ahead, a deeper look at what's troubling Donald Trump.
Fidel Castro, seen here with his brother Raul,
has been a focal point of controversy ever since his Barbudos, his bearded guerrillas, overthrew the Batista regime on New Year's Day this year. His executions of former enemies, his gentle handling of communists, his land reform program involving expropriation of large United States interests, all these things have kept him in the headlines. He was interviewed in Havana by CBC reporter Michael McClear.
Like in Canada, we find support too in the public opinion.
Last year, by far the sharpest thorn in the American side was Cuba. Raul Castro, the Minister of Defense, one of the most bitter enemies of the United States, his hatred of all things American surpassed only by that of his brother Fidel.
Do you think that Canada should continue to trade with Cuba despite the United States embargo on trade with that country?
I don't think we should let the United States decision not to trade with Cuba to influence us. I think we have to stick to the United States policy. I personally am against any trade with Cuba.
Pierre Trudeau was the first leader of a Western industrial nation to step on Cuban soil, to be greeted with a warm and friendly double handshake by Fidel Castro, since Castro came out of the mountains, leading a revolution that started turning Cuba into a communist state in 1959. At a quick news conference, Trudeau was asked if he was concerned about the people back home who were shocked by his presence in a communist state.
Well, the category of people which would be shocked by that have long since been shocked by my visit to China and to the Soviet Union, so I guess I can't worry about that.
The Prime Minister arrived. Fidel Castro was there to greet him with a tirade about the United States.
El bloqueo contra Cuba.
Castro said the blockade is a calumny. He said it's genocide. The Prime Minister made no direct response to him. In his brief remarks, he talked of a new awareness in Cuba.
An expression of confidence in the increasing openness of Cuba to the wider world.
Most of these people couldn't tell you the name of the Canadian Prime Minister, but they know about Canada. Canada figures high up in their hopes.
Well, I think he owes an explanation to the American people, and we need to hear it.
What do you think of how the White House has been responding so far?
I don't think we've had that explanation yet.
Well, as you've been hearing here tonight, there's been a great deal of talk and analysis about how Donald Trump's been conducting himself this past week. What he said to Russian officials, to James Comey, and then what he said afterwards, both in person and on Twitter. But what about the White House? Is there a clear strategy around all this? And can it get Trump through this latest controversy unscathed? To help unpack some of this, Nicole Hemmer, a historian of American politics, the Republican Party, and party politics. We spoke earlier. Nicole, you're a political historian, so I want to ask you about the comment that Donald Trump made today. He said, no politician in history has been treated worse or more unfairly. Is there any truth to that?
Well, I think that probably reflects Donald Trump's appreciation for superlatives when he's talking about his presidency. Look, presidents have taken it on the chin a lot from the opposition party, from media. Thomas Jefferson at the beginning of the 19th century was dragged through the mud by the opposition party. Richard Nixon, of course, would put in a claim for being the worst treated. Trump has not had a good time with the media. Part of that is of his own making. Part of that is because many journalists see him as unfit for the presidency. So it's not been an easy road for him, but maybe not historic. Yeah,
and there are lots of Republicans who'd like to hit the reset button on the whole presidency, the way it's got off to this start. But is that possible now, especially with talk today of the former FBI director testifying about what's in those memos? The story has legs, as we like to say in the world of journalism. So what's the strategy for Trump now?
Well, that's actually a really good question. I think that the news from the last 24 hours or so has shown that this has really taken a turn, and there is no hitting the reset button, as you say, because what we've seen in the past is that when a story breaks, when a scandal breaks, the Trump administration spins. They come out immediately and they hit back hard. But it's been more or less radio silence from the administration, from many top Republicans since this news came out. And I think that's an indication that They know that this is different, that this is going to lead to investigations, subpoenas, and they need to be very careful about what they say, lest what they say gets used against them in a court of law.
Well, you know, we've seen a lot of Republicans, key Republicans, still supporting him, still not swaying away from the presidency. I'm wondering at what point could that change?
Well, I think it's going to be based on their calculations of how much he's hurting their legislative agenda. Impeachment, if that's what we're talking about here, the removal of the president, that is a political decision. It takes the House to pass a bill of impeachment. It takes the Senate, 67 votes in the Senate to impeach. So it would require Republicans to be on board and, in fact, to be leading the charge toward impeachment. And that's damaging to them and to their political prospects. So it would take them reaching the point where they saw themselves with no other option, that they needed to move forward with impeachment in order to do anything else as legislators. So I think we're still, if that's in the offing, it's a long ways away still.
Well, we were speaking to one of our correspondents in Washington earlier, talking about how the Trump base has really been saying over and over again, this is fake news. The leaks, the Russian intelligence, all of this is fake news. But does that carry any weight within the Republican establishment itself? Are they seeing this as just another media attack on the presidency?
Well, I think the framework of this as a media attack has some legs because it's very popular with the base. But I don't think that's how Republicans in office are primarily seeing it. I think they understand quite well what the legal ramifications and the political ramifications of Trump's decision to fire Comey, to get himself involved in the investigation, to share intelligence with Russians in the White House. I think they understand the bigger import of all of that. So the same thing happened with Richard Nixon during Watergate. There was a tendency to talk about it amongst Republicans and conservatives as a media issue, that the media were attacking the president. I'm not sure that that's going to hold a lot of water in this case. It will be something that you hear repeatedly, and it is something that is going to, I think, be the dominant framework on the right, that this is a media attack against Trump. But I do think that Republican politicians are going to have to deal with it on a more serious level.
In a word, do you believe Donald Trump will be president on this day next year?
I do.
Nicole, great to talk to you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
When we come back, Red Sharon catches up with a cancer patient as she prepares to learn if she's beating back the disease.
You ready for it?
I'm ready for it. I can't not be ready for it.
Carly Muir has faced her struggle with spirit and courage. You'll see a whole array of emotions as this crucial chapter unfolds.
The game is Space War and is played on a computer. At the moment, it provides esoteric sport for young mathematicians at MIT. Someday, it may train them to fight a war in space.
Whether it's the nice zingy sound they make, the electronic challenge, or just the thrill of controlling what happens on a television screen, TV games are exerting a powerful fascination.
What do you think of the game you're playing?
I love it.
These students at the University of Alberta in Edmonton have developed a series of games that can be played on the computer.
The idea of the game is to manipulate the cursor towards your enemy until you get him in the center. And once you've got him there, bang, and he's dead.
Defender, Asteroids, Missile Command, the names of some of the arcade hits that are attracting millions of video addicts every day. Video junkies have a current favorite. Someone even wrote a song about Pac-Man. Pac-Man grossed more money in arcades last year than the movie Star Wars, one of the most successful Hollywood films. These are not games you would find in an arcade. They are the latest generation of home video. And this is where the real boom in the industry is occurring.
I don't play that much.
They're really addicted to this thing.
This is a story about a game. A game some say is so exciting, so enthralling, so much fun, that if you ever start playing, you won't be able to stop. Your fingers flying over buttons as you jump, fly, crush, and kill your way through an alternate reality.
Alluring, fascinating, compelling. A curse.
They're video games, the flashy, trashy offshoots of the computer revolution.
Its programmers say we haven't seen anything yet.
The first, the best known, the sex change operation was one performed about 15 years ago on a young ex-GI named George Jorgensen, who went to Copenhagen and came back as Christine. When Christine's story was told around the world, there were applications from hundreds of young men who wanted to undergo the same kind of operation.
Well, Diana, now that you're officially a woman, how does it feel?
I feel absolutely marvelous, thank you.
Did you always want to be a woman?
As long as I can remember, sir, yes.
And now that you are, what do you miss most about being a man?
I never was really in intensity a man, or psychologically, so I miss nothing about my malehood.
Lee Davis of Ottawa was born a woman. Recently, after a number of medical operations, Lee Davies became a man.
I was only a kid. I felt different. I mean, I knew I wasn't, my body wasn't what my mind was saying I was. My mind was totally male.
Caroline's surgery 17 years ago gave her the woman's body she dreamt of and a model's salary of $200,000 a year. No one questioned her femininity. In fact, she modeled for 7 years before the British tabloids made her story public. She even played a Bond girl in a 007 film. It's only the British government that doesn't accept the change.
I'm sort of classified still as a man. I mean, I break the law every day if I use the women's toilet. I mean, I can't really use the men's. I mean, if I committed a crime, I'd be in a men's prison.
Playing was just huge for me because it gave me a place where I could go and not think about having cancer.
Carly Muir has spent much of her young life under the shadow of cancer, showing resilience and spirit when others might not. But make no mistake, she's in a scary situation. We first met her last fall when doctors in Vancouver used a pioneering laser treatment on her brain tumor. Tonight, Red Sharon meets up with her again as she prepares for a moment of truth. Did her treatment work?
It's been almost 6 months. We've kept in touch, but today,
hello. Hi, how are you?
It's face to face.
Good to see you. I brought you a treat. Yeah, they're lemon blueberry scones.
Oh my goodness.
Am I allowed to give you a hug?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. You look fabulous.
Thanks.
Fabulous for a young woman who's been through what she has. At the age of 19, the first big scare of her life, a seizure while playing basketball. Carling's mom, Shelley.
We were driving in and she was still in the ambulance. And they had to pull over because she had a seizure on the way to the hospital. And I could hear her yelling in the background. It was terrifying. Terrifying. Yeah.
He came in and said that they had found a significant sized tumor in the left lobe of my brain and that we would have to go in for emergency surgery.
You remember that?
I remember that because I remember the first question I asked was, am I going to die? And I vividly remember asking that question.
Her father, Grant, is a retired Vancouver firefighter.
I've seen a lot of gruesome things in my life, and I almost threw up when they showed me the picture and I saw this. And it's just like a black and white picture. It's not gory, but just...
Yeah, that hit you.
It was like nothing ever.
Everything changed.
I'm sorry.
That was 10 years ago. Rushed into surgery, weeks in recovery. She's been fighting ever since.
I did the chemo for a year, but I was able to go back and play that following September while I was going through chemo. And then I was good for about 5 years, and I got re-diagnosed, and I did 6 weeks of radiation. again, decided to play through it. Playing was just huge for me because it gave me a place where I could go and not think about having cancer. Got re-diagnosed again, did chemo for 10 months, and then had about 6 months off after that, and then I got told I was re-diagnosed again.
But she never stopped fighting, not once.
I have Survivor right here. I know that I have cancer, and I technically haven't beaten it, but I feel like I don't let it change who I am as a person.
It doesn't define you.
No, exactly. So when I'm having a bad day, I just look down and remind myself that I'm a survivor, and it doesn't get to define who I am.
Just last fall, an opportunity came to attack the cancer once more, using a brand new, less invasive technique.
Right down the middle.
Yeah. Her doctor, Dr. Brian Toyota, thought he had a great shot at killing most of it.
Laser by itself won't cure cancer. And it's not going to be the treatment for everybody, but for the right person, it will be part of that combination of treatments. And so that's its place. And it's innovative, it's new, and that's what we have to do, I think, to beat cancer, because we haven't beaten it yet, so we have to stop doing what we used to do and try new things.
So it increases the percentage of success or the chance of success?
It definitely does. And you're right, it's not the magic bullet for everybody, but for the right person with the right combination, it'll make a huge difference. And so we have to push that frontier, and this is what this is doing.
Right, well, let's hope that's what it does for Carly.
You bet.
A small hole for the probe was drilled into her skull. Then the laser was guided in real time using an MRI.
How long should it take once you start with the laser?
The actual laser, I suspect, will take about 20 minutes of actual lasering. Yeah.
Wow.
It varies from tumor to tumor, but just estimating Carling's, the way it's looking, I think 20 minutes.
Carling remained awake through it all. As the yellow line expanded, the laser did its work, killing the cancer.
This entire area has been eradicated of tumor. So we're going to go a little bit deeper. It is close to her speech area, so we're mindful of that, of course.
This is good?
Yes, it's all good. She's comfortable. We're happy with what we've achieved so far. I'd like to get a little bit more. And then we'll be done, and then take her upstairs, and we'll take that little device out of her skull, and she can eat, which I know she's been hungry. All done, Carly.
That was 6 months ago. She's been on chemotherapy ever since, trying to kill the cancer they couldn't reach.
Just like any other medication, like my tumor has gotten smarter, so it knows how to react. Like the first time I did temozolomide was back in 2006, and it had never seen it before, and so it reacted really well. Now it's not reacting at all.
Psychologically, how have you been coping?
Again, like I have my good days and I have my bad days. My good days, like hopefully outweigh my bad days, and yeah, that's really what it comes down to. There's been things this time that like I've had to think about that I haven't had to think about before. Knowing like I can't freeze my eggs anymore or stuff like that, knowing I can't give like a family, that stuff's been hard. But then there's like a sense of like when I'm going through all this, my family, like we become like a solid unit, and I have to focus on those type of things.
Then a month ago, driving home after a girls' weekend, she felt a seizure coming on again.
It was about 9:30, so it was dark, and I was in the middle lane. So I hit my brakes, and I remember cars coming past and honking, but I couldn't see them because my head was like looking up at the roof.
So you managed to get off the road?
I think someone drove my car off the road after like...
Okay, but you got it stopped?
I had it stopped, yeah, and it's just, I'm so lucky that I wasn't hit.
Yeah, you must have thought about that.
I was like, when I was having my seizure, I had enough, I don't know, memory to think like, oh my God, I'm gonna get hit. I'm gonna get hit. It was terrifying. I couldn't think of a more scary thing to happen. Yeah.
Tomorrow's a big day.
It is a big day.
Ready for it?
I'm ready for it. I can't not be ready for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is what it is.
It's exactly, yeah.
Yeah. It could be bad news.
It could be bad news. Yep. It could be good news. It could be we're just going to continue on with chemo news.
Yeah. You gonna sleep tonight?
Yep. Yeah.
You're amazing.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine they're waiting to hear the news that will affect all their lives. Carling's parents and partner Andrew are here to offer support.
We joke around a lot in here, and so we always wonder like if it's like making like other rooms feel uncomfortable.
Neuro-oncologist Dr. Brian Thiessen has been assessing Carling's scan.
Hey, hi guys.
Hello.
He will deliver the findings.
So we have some things to chat about today.
Oh no.
There are some issues with your scan we have to deal with.
Okay.
It's not good news.
So this is your picture from the last scan, right?
This is now?
And this is now.
It's bigger.
It's causing a bit more pressure. It's starting to get into that corpus callosum there too. So that's the corpus callosum, which is the connector fibers between the two sides of your brains. So it's starting to creep over that way.
There are options. Carling already knows what she wants to do.
I personally, I know we haven't talked about it yet, but I would like to go the surgery route because it just makes more sense in the long run.
It's definitely growing reasonably quickly now.
Okay.
It seems to have gotten a bit bigger, or the pace changed from sort of the last two scans to this one.
Yeah.
So I think we can't sit there and wait 6 months to do it.
Within the month?
Within 4 weeks.
It's a lot to absorb.
We've always tried to be somewhat gentle on her brain.
So now it's time for plan B.
But now we will probably have to increase our risk that we might hurt her and end up with brain injury changes that are not great. So that's our concern.
She's one tough young woman.
She has been. I mean, she's been battling this for many years, and you know, she's gone through all these treatments and continued to thrive despite them. So
I can tell you're a little disappointed yourself. It's hard to do this, eh?
Yes, especially when it's young people like this. I mean, it's a challenge to deal with brain tumors at any time, but when you're dealing with young people and young lives, it's a lot more challenging.
Carling and Andrew head off to talk. Mom and Dad are understandably in shock.
Scared.
Yeah.
It's getting scary.
She puts on a pretty good front, I know, for us. Still strong, right?
Oh my goodness, we're scared. Can you imagine what she's feeling right now?
Yeah. The pier at Port Moody is a good place to think. There's a lot to think about. As this survivor takes each step, each new battle, one day at a time. Red Sharon, CBC News, in Port Moody, British Columbia.
There's also been an update with Dr. Brian Toyota and the NeuroBlate probe. Since Carling's operation, Dr. Toyota has done 8 more cases from across Canada. But now the program has hit a wall with funding. So this type of surgery is no longer available in Canada. There are several laser sites in the U.S., but the cost starts at about $170,000 Canadian. Stay strong, Carling. Coming up next, what's in store for Canada's peacekeepers? New dangers and painful old memories. First, let's check the business numbers. As we told you earlier, markets took a hit today. The TSX plunged 269 points. The dollar dropped 1/10 cent. In New York, the Dow lost a whopping 372 points. The price of oil, however, closed up 41 cents a barrel.
I think a lot of the fellas make the mistake of looking for a girl that's absolutely perfect. Of course, I mean, you like to try and make her as almost perfect as you can, but, I think you should learn to get along with the bad qualities and the good qualities.
What's your opinion on this business of going steady?
I think it's something that it just shouldn't be.
You mean it hasn't happened to you yet?
Well, not exactly.
It will someday. Don't look so smug.
I started dating when I was about 12 or 13.
Well, so the prestige of having a boyfriend.
I don't know, I think you get too tied down. It's almost like getting married.
How do you make up your mind how far you're going to go on a date?
Or it depends on the girl.
Well, I've recently met a fellow who believes that without exception, men, women, whether they're separated, divorced, or 3-time losers, still cling to the hope that somehow, somewhere, there's someone just for them. He's Morton Victor, who tried to speed the process of natural selection by organizing a singles festival.
Being single could be very frustrating. It could be very depressing at times.
Just came to meet some nice young girl.
Well, maybe in the sense to meet somebody.
Oh, to meet some girls.
You have to go looking for men?
No, I don't. But I mean, there's something new or something like that. I don't know.
Single and lonely and looking for love. A growing number of Canadians find themselves in precisely that situation these days.
The big problem today is the eternal one of finding someone who thinks you're as kind, sweet, sexy, sophisticated, witty, and intelligent as you know yourself to be. Where, oh where, to find such an extraordinary animal.
When your opening line is in a newspaper, you can say whatever you want. It's something single people in Toronto are doing more than ever.
You have total and complete anonymity.
Do you believe that you can find the woman of your dreams?
If you have the persistence to not be disappointed, by all rights, the heart should take over when you do meet the right person anyhow.
Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-day. My, oh my, what a wonderful day. Hey!
Ryan Gosling is on top of the world. Well, at least the entertainment world. He's a mouseketeer.
Hey, Ma, I'm home.
It's really neat because he kind of laid low and he did, he said, we picked out of a lot of talented kids and everything, Ryan, and, I wanted you to know that you're a mouseketeer. And I went, no way. And my mom she hit the roof.
My biggest feeling was just that I was so happy for Ryan. I was happy that he was, that he got a yes answer.
Ryan had already caught a lot of eyes with his feet. He'd won an Ottawa talent show, Homegrown Cafe, and several dance competitions in the United States as well. But it was his clean-cut looks and his singing which won him an audition with Disney officials last month in Florida.
She that travel around this floor and put you down. So people, let me put you on.
Now, after signing a 1-year contract, he'll do singing and dancing on the Mickey Mouse Club.
To me, it's luck because there was kids there that were just phenomenal, so luck.
Sorry about that. Move it along. Yeah, there you go.
The Trudeau government trumpeted Canada's return to peacekeeping, then went silent for months. Now CBC News has learned details of the government's Blue Helmet blueprint. As Murray Brewster explains, it involves real risks in some dangerous places, something veterans of Afghanistan will find all too familiar.
Now you're ready to reload again.
Canada's reputation for training other militaries was largely conceived in Kandahar. Canadians instructed Afghan troops, led them and bled with them in combat. It was difficult, dirty, dangerous work. Multiple sources tell CBC News it is that kind of training that figures prominently in the government's peacekeeping plan. Last summer, the Liberals promised 600 troops and 150 police officers for UN operations. Where they would go was to be worked out. There is UN demand for Canadian trainers in Africa, but also risks.
We have a difficult history in Africa as peacekeepers, and we need to make sure that when we embark on any mission, military mission, we make the right decisions about what we're going to do, how we're going to do it.
Justin Trudeau is referring to Somalia and Rwanda, two troubled peacekeeping missions that left an indelible mark on Canadians and their military. Some of the countries under consideration today are also deeply troubled. Mali in West Africa tops the list.
It certainly is one of the most dangerous missions, and scores of peacekeepers have been killed in ambushes. It should be said that the majority of those who have died have been relatively poorly armed, poorly protected African troops.
Some experts in human rights who have trained troops in the developing world are concerned.
From the work that I've done, if I get to make an impact, a positive impact, on perhaps 10% of the troops that I'm working with, I deem it a success.
But others, including the men who led the Rwanda mission over 20 years ago, say there is no better prepared nation than Canada, particularly when it comes to facing child soldiers in Africa. Afghanistan was a bloody, wrenching experience, but the military has learned from it.
But we've been able to lick our wounds long enough that we're able to handle this new challenge.
One of the reasons the Liberals have hesitated so much on peacekeeping is that it's going to be dangerous. Just how dangerous? Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland is expected to outline in a speech to Parliament in a few weeks' time. Romeo Dallaire argues that the longer Canada waits, the more harshly history will judge us. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canadians will get a clearer picture tomorrow of how the government wants to bring in its national carbon tax. It will release a discussion paper primarily aimed at the provinces that don't yet have a price on carbon. The government announced last year that every province must have a plan to price carbon in place by the end of next year. 5 already do, 4 have plans for one. Saskatchewan has steadfastly resisted. Well, a bright spot today for people affected by recent flooding in Quebec. The province is increasing the amount of money they can receive in compensation. The maximum payout for damaged homes has gone up 25% to $200,000. Businesses will be able to claim $265,000. About 4,000 buildings were affected by floodwaters. Severe flooding has prompted the evacuation of a small Labrador community. Dozens of people have been airlifted out of Mud Lake to nearby Happy Valley Goose Bay. Ice jams are causing a river and lake to overflow. Now stay tuned for a party as Montreal celebrates a big birthday. Some people aren't in the festive spirit.
I'm Anna Maria Tremonti. Tomorrow on The Current, 4 MPs from different parties rise up from the House to offer a collaborative roadmap to improve our working democratic institutions. Their ideas on The Current, weekdays at 8:30 on CBC Radio 1.
The grooves on a long playing record are 1/1000th of an inch wide. From cutting to wrapping, the disc is processed by a dozen or more men whose sole preoccupation is to ensure that the original sound will be preserved in all its clarity and brilliance on the mass-produced article.
From the moment the first Sony Walkman made its appearance in this country, Canadians have taken to the little toys like beavers to trees.
Yes, I'm on my way.
Music to go. Whatever your taste, you can now take it with you. No one need ever know that you're marching to the beat of a different drummer.
In spite of the success of Canadian artists, the domestic record industry has gone through 4 straight lean years. It's estimated that home taping, pirating, is costing the industry at least $100 million a year in lost sales. And that's nothing compared with the upheavals that lie ahead.
The latest innovation in hi-fi sound is the digital audio disc. It could make your old phonograph records as obsolete as the wax cylinders of Edison's day.
Beneath the clear plastic coating are little lands and grooves that are read by a laser.
Turntables for these new miracle discs will cost over $1,000.
Customers snap them up as fast or faster than the manufacturers turn them out. And every record and tape is being converted to compact disc, from Buddy Holly to Beethoven.
It's also the kind of music that's all over the internet in MP3 format. And many of those young fans know a lot about the internet, so instead of buying the hits, a lot of them just download them for free.
Music World filed for bankruptcy protection on Friday, following other Canadian retailers, like Sam the Record Man, forced to close their doors amid increased competition from big box retailers. And more Canadians going online to download music, either from illegal file sharing sites or legit services like iTunes.
10 years ago, when iTunes began selling music online, the music industry looked on with grave suspicion. But today, iTunes has become one of the few reliable revenue streams. Last year, it became North America's biggest music seller.
Google has entered the digital music business. It's launched its new service in Canada today.
Like iTunes or Spotify or Pandora or Songza or a number of other services, you'll be able to buy a subscription to stream music.
Because you know I'm all about that bass, no trouble.
There's always been change in the music industry. There's been change ever since we started, and it will continue to change.
Bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, bass.
When Calls the Heart, new season this summer on CBC.
This amazing gesture is the icing on the cake. By no means is this the end. The curtain has not yet fallen. It's simply stuck.
Sorry about that. Move it along. Yeah, there you go.
Finally tonight, a big happy birthday to my hometown of Montreal. Today marks 375 years since its establishment. And to celebrate, the city is throwing quite the extravaganza with lights, dance, and of course, protest. Alison Northcott reports from Montreal.
Across the city, church bells rang out, marking 375 years since the founding of the French colony Ville-Marie that became Montreal.
We're marking the beginning of the Montreal endeavor.
The day in 1642 when French missionaries settled here.
But somehow they survived winter, they survived a lot of ordeal, and they started settling things. And what we have today is their legacy.
The city is celebrating all year in a big way with cultural and infrastructure projects that come with a multi-million-dollar price tag.
It sends a strong message that the living together is part of our DNA.
At a ceremony in the heart of Old Montreal, dignitaries marked the contribution of the city's French founders, but also acknowledged the much longer history of the area's Indigenous population.
Part of being an open, modern, vibrant city is recognizing the errors of the past and building always together for a brighter future.
Some in the Indigenous community see the celebrations as a step toward reconciliation.
And reconciliation means that people begin to understand their roots, understand that this land that they're standing on is the kind of territory that contains my nation.
But others say they feel like an afterthought.
Why don't you use our practices? It's something that you had, removed from us forcibly. That would have been nice. That would have been reconciliation.
While city officials celebrated, some groups took to the streets in protest. Montreal police officers locked in a years-long dispute with the city over pensions used today to highlight their frustration. One of the most expensive and controversial projects is a $40 million lighting installation on the Jacques Cartier Bridge. Some see it as a waste of taxpayers' money, but organizers say it will have a lasting legacy. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
And that's the National for this Wednesday night. For news at any hour, you can always go to our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm Mark Kelly. Thanks so much for watching.